Thank you for joining us today for our webinar titled Office 365, It's More Than Exchange. Your host today is Microexcel. We are a full-service staffing and consulting organization focused on enabling businesses to get more done with technology. We recently celebrated 15 years at our HQ location in Secaucus, New Jersey. What makes us stand out is our flexible delivery model. With over 1,500 global employees, we have the ability to offer cost-effective projects and resources on-site, offshore, or a mixture of both. We currently manage over 30,000 Office 365 users and would be honored to add you as a new customer to help you get the most out of your technology investment. Our presenter today is John Adams. John is our Managed Services Lead for Office 365. He has extensive experience in utilizing Office 365 in the platform for multiple business practices, helping organizations drive productivity. So with that, I will now turn the floor over to John Adams.
Thank you. So, as Jill said, we're here to talk about Office 365. Now, obviously, as was mentioned in the title of today's presentation, Office 365 has Exchange Online. That's fantastic, but there's a lot more to it. OneDrive, SharePoint, all these names you've probably seen over the years, they're all part of the Office 365 package. But they're also available, for your on-prem environment. But Office 365 is pushing that boundary of what you can do with tools and adding new features to the mix with Planner, Flow, Power Apps, and Groups. Now you see Groups is actually using the same icon right now as Outlook. I'll show you why in a minute. So let's start at the very beginning. And of course, when we talk about productivity and tools and of course Exchange, we're talking about mail. Now, email is a huge part of our corporate productivity. It's actually the primary tool used for communication, collaboration, information sharing, you name it. In fact, over 30 hours a week is how often an employee will use email. This is a technology that was first invented in 1971. So for 45 years, we've been using the same technology to drive our corporate communication and productivity. In fact, it's gotten to the point where you're checking email so much that your work isn't getting done. It's actually hindering the productivity of your employees in your organization. So really the only solution is to ban all email from the workplace. And I'm joking, but the fact remains that something has to drastically be done. But I'm sure some of you had a heart attack right now when I mentioned just getting rid of email. It's a core part of what we do every day and how we operate. And so we need to embrace that as well as improve upon it. So, but there has to be some better tools than email, right? Well, absolutely. We have a whole, what I call an ecosystem of tools from Microsoft aimed to help us communicate and collaborate. If we look at productivity as it applies today, there's some core categories that we see appearing. Document management, tasks, calendaring, a centralized directory to find the employees, conversations, and that's anything allowing you to just talk back and forth, other than just face-to-face. Presence, the ability to know where someone is and whether they're available. A wiki to have a shared source of knowledge that your entire team can contribute to. And of course, social media, where information and basically any information is shared, commented on, and then just virally distributed throughout a network of people. And all of these actually touch on, all of the Microsoft productivity ecosystem tools touch on at least one section of these productivity buckets. However, you'll see that oftentimes there's many tools that touch on the same bucket. So all of a sudden, not only do we have better tools, but we have too many tools. One group of users might decide to use SharePoint and store their information there, but another group might have an active social community on Yammer and store their data up there. So all of a sudden, you're fractured. You have better tools to do the job, but you're all over the place. And so that can be a bit of a problem, especially when you're a user trying to find a specific piece of information. So what is a better solution for the users? Users want a way to find and share information without impacting what they do day to day. You know, they want to have their cake and they want to eat it too. They don't want to have to change what they're doing, but they want to be able to do what they're doing better, faster. And what that translates to is, you know, they want to have a single location where they can go to for all their calendaring, document management, wiki functionality. They want it to be integrated into email, again, because this is how everyone works day to day. It's all about email. But email itself is not enough to get the job done. You want to also have self-service site creation. Basically, we want to get rid of IT as a barrier to use. IT is great. It's necessary. But it's also, to the end users, it's stopping them from going and getting their job done. So we need to remove that barrier so there's zero cost of entry for an employee to go and embrace a new productivity solution. And then finally, and this may sound like you know, just an almost needy feature, but it actually is very essential, is to have it built into Office. You know, every day we're not in a website necessarily, but every day we're in Outlook, we're in Word, we're in Excel. Office itself is a delivery platform for this productivity tool. And so the better it integrates into where we are day to day, the more effective this tool will be. And this may sound a little off the wall. It's almost an impossible feat. And that's why it can be considered a unicorn, you know, that mythical beast that everybody wants but doesn't exist. But Microsoft is working to make that unicorn appear. And that's where we're going with groups in Office 365. So groups are that attempt to provide a self-service collaboration offering. And it's trying to take the best pieces from that entire Microsoft productivity ecosystem and bring them into a single experience for the users. So you might notice on the screenshot here, the first thing that might pop out is the word Outlook up top. Groups are actually managed mailboxes, essentially, managed shared mailboxes. So they're taking the email experience, they're turning it on its head, but still providing it in a manner that's accepted and palatable by the user. In this case, we have conversations. What you would see before, almost like a Facebook comment thread, posting back and forth, liking, including people. This is all actually email, but formatted such that it's a easily traversed conversation within a collaboration group. Same thing with calendars. You see here, this is just what you would expect from an Outlook calendar, except it's a shared calendar attached to your group, just the way all these other components are. Now, you may wonder, this looks like Exchange, but why didn't they choose a SharePoint calendar? If you ask people if they had to choose SharePoint calendar out of the box or an Exchange calendar out of the box, at least 8 out of 10 would say Exchange calendar. It's familiar, it's easy, and it's really the best user experience for most individuals. But then we get into file sharing. And so far, we've just been talking about rehashing the email experience, rehashing the Outlook experience with calendars. But file sharing, you really can't contest that SharePoint is the go-to for document management. So what Microsoft has done with groups is they've brought that in to that shared collaborative experience. And they made it a SharePoint document library. It's the core file repository for Microsoft Office 365 groups. So you get that great versioning, integration with Office, Word, Excel, all those tools you expect, and because of the new direction of Office 365 document libraries, it looks just like OneDrive. So you have also a consistent experience with your OneDrive, your SharePoint document libraries, and your document library as part of Microsoft Office 365 groups. And then we finally have OneNote. Now, OneNote satisfies that wiki experience. I'm sure many of you may be using OneNote just for personal notes, They made it free for all platforms, and it's just a great note-taking tool. It's also more than just an individual tool, though. It's great for group collaboration and information sharing. If you want to build a manual where everybody in your group just goes and starts entering the knowledge they want, OneNote is the tool for that. And they've integrated that into groups to satisfy that wiki component of tracking information across a team. And they've taken this a step further. As I mentioned, to really be everywhere that the user is, you want to integrate it into the Office. And that's just what they've done. In Outlook, as part of your core experience, you have groups now in Office 2016. And groups they're mirroring just what you see online, with your conversations, your calendars, your files being in SharePoint, and your notebook in OneNote Online. And on the left-hand side, which you can't see on the screenshot, but your groups are listed as if they were just another mailbox, because that's essentially what they are, but just with a whole lot more functionality around them. Now, groups do have a downside, and that is that there's not a lot you can do in terms of administration and control. You can turn them off. You say people can't create groups, or you can say people can create groups. There's no in between. Same thing with administration. You can help manage the members and the owners who have access to that group, but you can't put restrictive policies on the data. You can't undelete a group, although that's a feature I believe that's being added soon if it hasn't already. So it's very basic what you can do to a group in terms of administration. It's either all or nothing. And some of you might be saying, this seems very familiar, to the point where actually, yeah, they're actually using SharePoint. So why recreate the wheel? Why not just use SharePoint for everything? Why are we going somewhere with groups where you're taking a bit from column A and column B instead of just staying with that sole platform that we're so used to with SharePoint and SharePoint Online? And part of the difference is you're going for features versus simplicity and ease of access. Groups, your content is spread all over, and that's actually a bit of a downside, whereas with SharePoint, it's all in one location. But with search is across everything in that group, but it's isolated to that group. Those groups are meant to be individual islands of information for the team. Same thing with, then we look into deletion. Items, they have, when items are deleted, they're essentially gone. They're not easy to recover items from a group, whereas in SharePoint, sites can be restored. And then you have administration, where you can basically delete or not delete a group. SharePoint, you can set storage quotas, information policies, a lot more extensible. And then provisioning. Groups, going back to being simple and easy, you get what you get. Or as my son likes to say, you get what you get and you don't get upset. There's no choices in groups, whereas in SharePoint, it's made so that you can customize the experience that you're getting with specific templates. So then we go into the question of, when do I use groups? And it's a scenario I like to call the city and the forest. The city, which is more like SharePoint Online, it's extensible. You can modify it with workflows, custom extensions, apps. It's structured. You're planning out what the sites are going to be ahead of time. You're saying these users can have this for information, these users can have this for applications, and everything is centralized, stored within that SharePoint content database. Whereas we get to the forest, which is groups. The forest is every group can be considered a tree. And so there's as many trees as people are willing to plant. If the user wants a group, they're going to create a group. And you end up with sprawl, a huge forest, lots of trees everywhere. But the users get self-service. They can do what they want when they want. It's fast, a click. And you have a collaboration environment for your whole team. And it's simple. There's low barrier to entry. It's everywhere you want to be. And it's exactly what you it's the on-demand solution, the ideal on-demand solution for users. So as you go back and forth, when you're making decisions, do I want to allow groups, or should this something be long-term and be done in SharePoint Online as a city versus a forest? That's an architectural decision and a decision your enterprise has to make. But bear in mind, this isn't either or. SharePoint Online and groups can and likely should exist in a cohabitation, as it were. They help and offset each other's weaknesses. So what about tasks? We're sitting here talking about an ideal productivity ecosystem, a one-stop shop, and we haven't touched on tasks, which is a core feature for organizing, assigning duties, and tracking progress along individual requests. Well, Microsoft has brought out a new tool for that called Planner. Planner is essentially the task hub. Tasks are organized into buckets called plans. So it's not just you have a task in general for a group, but you're actually creating a plan around it. What is that task part of? And that's what is going to contain all those individual tasks. Every group automatically has a plan created, and the permissions from a group, the membership, transfer over to that plan as well. Just like groups, plans are public or private. They can have members and owners, but there's no fine-grained permission. Just like with groups, whereas with SharePoint Online, you can specify permissions down to an individual file. Groups are meant, and plans are meant to be simple and high level. However, because groups tasks are broken down into plans and structured by what they relate to, they have created the My Tasks view. And this is a simple view that shows all tasks that are assigned to you. And as you can see in the screenshot, it's placed front and center. It's a core part of the planner experience. It's the ability to go into your individual tasks and see how you're progressing on them. Now, an individual plan itself, and here I've gone into a plan that's associated with this managed services group. The plans are a take on what's called a Kanban board. Now, Kanban boards are a method of organizing tasks as they flow through a process. In other words, as you have steps to a process, in progress, completed, reviewed, closed, a Kanban board helps you track that by actually moving a task descriptor to each individual stage. This used to be done with a whiteboard, sticky notes, and you just take the sticky note and move it to the different column. Well, Microsoft is trying to take that a step further while still keeping the efficiency of a Kanban board in place. So like a traditional Kanban board, tasks are structured and labeled by people who are assigned, but you can also define buckets, which are essentially those whiteboard columns that define the process and how those tasks have to flow through the process. But they've taken it also a step further in extending what information is contained within an individual task. As you can see, I've kind of spruced it up a bit. You can attach images and files to individual tasks. You can also have sub-checklists, so that even though a task has multiple subcomponents, that can be easily made visible and actually tracked as part of the task itself. And they continue to try and provide you as much information as possible by offering charts, simple out-of-the-box reports that tell you who has a large number of tasks, how many of them are in what state, to help you see how these items are going through that Kanban flow. And you notice it also has a notebook link. That is the same notebook as with groups. Again, it's just a shared wiki of information. So they're not trying to say, here's a separate notebook for plans. If you have a plan that's associated with a group, you use that group notebook. And so you have that continuity of information across all these different tools. Now, right now, as I mentioned, groups, their search is isolated. When you're looking for information in a group, it's an island. However, Delve helps you break out of that island and gives you that aerial view. If you're not familiar with Delve, Delve is a tool where it does the searching for you before you even need to know you need the information. It sees what you're looking at on a regular basis. It sees what the people you're looking at and what they're looking at to build basically a kind of a matrix of information, and uses that to determine what information you might find useful at a given moment. And that's what the Delve board delivers. But you can take it further in terms of customization. You can actually assign individual items from Delve to what's called a board. It's the same thing as if you take, let's consider we have like a bookshelf. You're taking certain books and you're categorizing them based on that board. Except it's not just you. Boards are inherently open to everyone in your organization. So suddenly you're not the one classifying information. Your whole organization is classifying information to help make it easier for you to find what you need across groups, across SharePoint Online, plans, etc. And then we have some new kids on the block. And these are tools that are part of Office 365, but are meant to help extend the reach of an Office 365 instance. We have Flow. And Flow is a workflow, except it's not for just inside one given application. It's to help multiple applications coordinate and share information. And then we have Power Apps. Power Apps provides an easy way to make mobile native applications that interact with items like SharePoint Online and Office 365, but also with your flows and other data sources. So in fact, Flow and Power Apps are being designed to work together. They're bros. But when you think about it further, they also work on opposite ends of the user spectrum. You have a user with a mobile device, so you're expanding the devices that can now interact with Office 365 through custom applications. But you also have external systems with Flow. So you're expanding the systems that can now talk with Office 365 and that can coordinate information. So suddenly Office 365 isn't just this great productivity ecosystem. It's just the center of an information rainbow. So information can flow back and forth between users and multiple systems surrounding your Office 365 environment. So we can dig into this a little bit and look at Flow. So just like I said, Flow is an inter-system workflow. Not intra, but inter, like internet. It connects multiple disparate systems as long as they've written an appropriate connector, and facilitates the flow of information from one system to the next. In this example, we have an item created in a SharePoint list flowing into Microsoft Translate. So we're going to take data from a SharePoint list item and push it to Microsoft Translate to translate it to a new language. After that, we take the output from Microsoft Translate and send an Office 365 email. And from there, we can chain yet another series of events, or we can branch into multiple paths. As you can see, applications such as Dropbox, Dynamics, and Dynamics is a huge one. Creating an interface between Dynamics and Office 365 in the past has been quite a challenge. But now it's literally 2 clicks to create that information flow. And you have tools such as, besides just Excel, we have MailChimp, Google Drive, Box, I've said MailChimp. There's a bunch of these different tools that suddenly they're no longer separate data systems. They're now another component in your workflow and can help contribute information to your Office 365 environment and vice versa. And then we have Power Apps. So Power Apps are a simple and easy way to make a native mobile application. It provides a GUI for creating a mobile application it can link into an existing data source such as a SharePoint custom list and actually generate the foundation for your application, doing all the heavy lifting for you. Now, I will say that while it can do all this for you, it is still very early in its development. So while it has a huge amount of potential, it still has a while to go. And same with Flow. Flow is only as good as the number of systems that are willing to tie into it. And right now there's a great deal of systems, but that is still growing. Plus, Flow is expanding its core system that it runs on. So right now, it's been just via web applications. But they've recently announced an iOS application for Microsoft Flow, and an Android one and Windows Phone are right behind it. So these tools are really being designed to be platform agnostic, but still tie into all that great Office 365 productivity, as well as all those other great applications that are creating connectors into Flow and Power Apps. So to give you an example, an overview of a full end-to-end application using Power Apps and Flow, we have something I've put together. I decided, let's go ahead and create a list to record a request to translate some text. When a new item is entered into that list via a Power Apps form, an item is created in a SharePoint list. That item is then sent to Microsoft Translate, translated, and then the output of the translate is sent via email to my Office 365 mailbox. And so with very little time, I've created a translate application. And some of you may say, well, why wouldn't you just cut and paste and send it? You can, but think about it. We're taking away those steps. We're trying to streamline the process. Take this a step further and say, imagine that you have an international organization that needs to communicate between themselves and between systems in multiple languages. Well, suddenly you have an easy way to automate that so the request can be submitted in your native language and sent to another participant or directly into another system in the language of the participant or the recipient. So I've gone through a lot rather quickly. But so we started out with Just Exchange, talking about Just Email, the tool that's really kind of had a grip on how we do business every day. And then we walked through how with groups we're expanding what email itself means in the context of Outlook and Office 365. Suddenly, email isn't just email that's bogging us down. Email becomes a productivity group where we can focus all our information around but not have to be stressed by just 1,000 items in our inbox. Same thing with tasks. Planner has helped us bring out not just a list of items that we have to do, but suddenly structure them, not just based on their topic and what they relate to, but by their flow across a given process to really help increase that productivity stream. And then we have Power Apps and Flow. These two tools are helping us bend the boundaries, kind of break the boundaries of Office 365. Now we're working with information that's not just part of Office 365, but we're easily taking information from multiple devices, sending it to multiple applications, and all of it focused around the same tool we use in our everyday lives. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for attending. Jill, do we have any questions?
Well, let's see. Yes, we have two questions here in the panel. The first one, does groups replace SharePoint? Do you think that is the direction Microsoft is going?
Absolutely not. As great as groups are, they complement SharePoint. Again, it's that city in the forest. If you want your users to have the best tools fast, absolutely use groups, but it will not replace SharePoint because it is not a structured environment. You're building information silos, not a giant enterprise collaboration platform. you're enabling your users to work better within their individual groups, but you're not helping you structure your information across the organization.
Okay, we have another question. Why don't I see Flow in my Office panel? Where do I find it?
So Flow and even Planner and Power Apps, those are all very early in the tool. Planner should be rolling out to most tenants, but Flow and the Power Apps are very early. Right now they're being only released to first release tenants. So you have to be patient and wait till your tenant gets upgraded to have those capabilities.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that concludes our presentation today. I do not see any more questions. So we hope that this was informative. You will have actually, let's see, one quick question. Does the group SharePoint files show up in a SharePoint search from an enterprise search site?
No, they do not. Groups actually are based around, they're basically a shared mailbox. So those searches from SharePoint, as it is today, from SharePoint Online, do not incorporate that group data. Right now, the best way to search across groups and SharePoint is to use Delve.
Okay, let me just double check one last time to make sure there's nothing else. Okay, so that will do it. As I mentioned, we are recording this webinar, so it's going to be available for future use if you want to reference some of the material that John covered. You will have a quick survey at the end before you hang up. And again, we thank you for joining us and have a great day.